Hey everybody, welcome to Accounting with Confidence. Every week I try to come to you with a video series that relates to something regarding accounting and using QuickBooks Desktop or QuickBooks Online. And today I want to talk to you about something I kind of forgot about, but has a bunch of time-saving tricks in it regarding general preferences inside of QuickBooks Desktop. So first, who am I? I am Beth Whitworth. I live in St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm a CPA and a QuickBooks guru. I've been working in QuickBooks for over 20 years, and that is pretty much exclusively the product we use for bookkeeping and payroll services within my accounting practice. So I'm a QuickBooks Pro Advisor. I've been in the Pro Advisor program and advanced certified for as long as that program has been around. And I actually love teaching people how to use QuickBooks more effectively and support both QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Desktop as we use both of those platforms inside of my business. So today we're going to talk about QuickBooks preferences. So within QuickBooks Desktop, you have a set of preferences that are behind the scenes and somewhat buried behind the scenes. And a lot of times, once you've set QuickBooks up, you never go back there, and you may or may not have been involved in the setup process of your file or even of your user. So you may not even know what's inside those preferences. So I want to talk a little bit today about what you can do with your general preferences. So to get to those preferences, you go to Edit and you come down to Preferences. There is no shortcut to this on your desktop. This is the only place inside of QuickBooks that you can access your preferences. And these preferences are preferences relating to all kinds of things within QuickBooks. There is everything from how your reports default, as far as what size and what font, to how you view your desktop and whether you want to see your reports on cash or accrual, your payroll setup options. There are so many things in here. But today I only want to focus on the tab that is the general preferences. So within your preferences, many of them have both a My Preferences and a Company Preferences. Now, the Company Preferences can only be accessed by someone with administrative privileges, and those affect things company-wide. So those preferences, there's not very many of them, but those are ones that whoever is administrating the file needs to decide how they want these things to function inside of the file for all users. And so those are things like the time format, how you want to show your years, if you want to show that in 4 digits, things like if you want to log off every time a user closes the company or exits QuickBooks, which is really, probably a good idea. Things like saving transactions before printing. You can force this onto all users. So we're not going to spend much time here, but back to My Preferences tab, there's lots of options in here, and some of these are major time savers. And some of them are a little tricky and can cause some issues if you're not paying attention. So the My Preferences affect each individual user. So if you're logged in as yourself and you set these preferences, this is what will work for you. But if there's another user in the file and they come in and they log in as themselves, they can set theirs differently. So you can have some settings that are not universal to the program and can cause some confusion. And that's why it's always so important to set up users for each user you have using the file and to have them always log in as themselves. The other best practice I'll just throw in here is don't ever, even if you are the administrator, don't log in as the administrator. So you should set up your own user and give yourself, unlimited processes and procedures and access to things, but don't log in as the administrator. Use that for just things that are housekeeping related inside your file, and that will save you from making some global changes that you may or may not have wanted to make. So here we are inside of My Preferences, and there's a bunch of toggle boxes. And the one that is I see used quite a bit is the turning off of the beep when recording a transaction. So a lot of people hate that annoying beep that when you save a transaction, it makes that loud beep noise. Here is where each individual user can turn that off, and so that you do not have to listen to that beep, especially when you're doing lots and lots of data entry. It can get pretty obnoxious. People go so far as to mute their computer, turn the volume all the way down, and then when they need it for some other function, they have to remember to go turn it back up. But here are the functions that you can look at here. Pressing enter moves between fields. Right now, the default for QuickBooks is that tab moves between fields. So be very careful with this one right now. Enter sometimes saves for you. It will not save for you if you change this to pressing enter moves between fields. Automatically open drop-down lists when typing. So this is pretty important, and this I see a lot of confusion with people when they say, I'm starting to type, and I have in my item list to fill in an invoice, and I'm not getting any prompts letting me help choose. And so this is where you turn that option on. You can automatically place your decimal point. This is something that I don't use inside of QuickBooks, although I have used inside of other software, and I use it actually on my 10 key because I am old school and still use a 10 key, but I don't use it inside of QuickBooks and have not tried it, but I may try that sometime this year. Warn when editing a transaction. You can turn this off, and that kind of goes hand in hand with warn when deleting a transaction or unused list item. Those two things, they default to being checked, and I think they should stay that way. Turning off warnings, especially if you are either new or unsure of whether or not you should be making a change, you want to make sure it's warning you and giving you an option to say, oh no, I didn't know I was making a change. I don't want to do that. If you turn this off, it's not going to warn you. So the next one is bring back all one-time messages. So there's a lot of things that pop up. One I can think of off the top of my head is when you first modify or customize a report setting, it'll say, hey, do you want to memorize this? Or do you want to refresh your report? And there'll be a toggle box there that says, don't show me this anymore. Well, sometimes people actually mark that box to say, don't show me this anymore, but they didn't really read what it said, and they need those one-time messages to come back. So this is your opportunity to bring those messages back. You would have the opportunity to then toggle those messages off as each one appears, especially regarding things. A lot of times it's with inventory changes and customizations, and so you might want to leave that, come back and bring that on one more time. This is what triggered me. Turn off pop-up messages for products and services. Oh my goodness. So what got me thinking about this week is that in many versions of my QuickBooks files, and I'm in and out of anything from 2018 on up to 2021, there's been the learn more about 1099s that keeps popping up at the top here. And so I thought, wow, is there a way to turn that off? And that's what got me jumping in here to my preferences. So you can turn off Intuit sales pitches. I don't know if that's actually going to turn off that top menu bar, but it's definitely going to turn off the things that say, hey, do you want to upgrade? Hey, do you want to use T-sheets? Hey, do you want to do this or that? And so here's where you can turn that off by person. The next one is show tool tips for clipped text. So that's when you are hovering over something and it's been shortened because the text is too long. If you hover over it, it will bring up the entire text. So that is also defaulted to on. So the ones that I definitely think that you should have toggled on would be automatically opening the drop-down lists, warning when editing, warning when deleting, and then the optional ones would be to turn off your messages for their self-promotion stuff and show your tooltips for clip text, which I believe is defaulted on. The other ones are up to you. So you can come in here and take the beeping off, the entering moves between fields, and then also the placement of the decimal point. And then the one-time messages, I would say, is kind of an occasional thing. The remaining sections become very, very important. This first one here in the middle is automatically recall information. Here's the issue with this. If you have this toggled on, you have the choice to automatically recall the last transaction or pre-fill the accounts for the vendor based on the past entries. So if you are typing in a new bill and you pull up this vendor, if you have this setting right here, it will pre-fill what expense accounts or whatever chart of accounts you had for the vendor. That is okay with me. The top one will automatically recall the last transaction, which means it will pre-fill the dollar amounts and the accounts. So the danger with this is you pull it up, you don't, recognize the fact that you might need to change that amount, and you just hit enter. And I have seen this many, many times where people are constantly putting in a bill, and it's the same all the time because they aren't making the dollar amount change. And to fix that, you can either turn this off completely so that it's not automatically remembering any account or transaction information, or you can have it set just to pre-fill the accounts, and that would save you some time for you having to pull up the chart of account that it needs to be coded to. This other section is default date to use for new transactions, and I see this all the time with people who have come in here and it is set to use the last entered date as the default. This can become a problem as well because if it's remembering the last date you entered and you were entering past information, maybe you're coming in and putting in old bills or old invoices, or maybe you're setting up the file for the first time, and it becomes easier to use this date to remember the last date that was entered so that you aren't constantly having to change the date, then that's okay. But once you're done putting in the old information, I recommend that you come in here and say use today's date as the default, because using those old dates can really mess up if you don't notice that it is, using an old date and it was 2 months ago, and you save an invoice that way, it really messes things up. You save a bill that way, you save a check that way, any of those things. So when you're doing setup, I don't mind this. When you are doing daily current activity, I say use today's date. And then this last one only applies to files that are using inventory, and that has to do with when you change and customize some item information on an invoice, whether or not you want it to ask or always or never save those changes. So these are my things that can really save you time. If you feel like you are constantly changing the date back to a current date, I would tell you to come in here and look at your general preferences and see if this is checked. And it may have been checked from the beginning, so when the setup was done and you were using the same user as was doing the setup, and so you were constantly changing the date. So come over here and toggle this back on. That, for me, makes much more sense. And then in this middle section, caution. It sounds like a great idea to say, hey, let's save lots of time and have it recall the last transaction and the dollar amount. Unless all your bills are always the same dollar amount, the same expense account, I would say this can cause more problems than it's worth. And so if you're going to have it on, make sure it's set to pre-fill the accounts for the vendors based on past entries only. Do not recall the last transaction, because that really can make a mess. So once you've made your changes, you're going to click OK. So we turned off the beep, so that'll be nice. We can look here and I can just, if we came in here to receive a payment, we have it set to default to today's date. And in this company file, it thinks today's date is 12/15/2025. And this is actually, it's a sample file, so I don't have a whole lot of control over making it read today's date correctly. However, I do see that accept credit cards and bank transfers online with QuickBooks payments. Learn more. You know what? That's still popping up, even though we said, hey, we don't want to see that. So I don't know that I hold out much hope that those sales pitches really can be turned off, but give it a try. Go in, click the button. Again, you're going to go to Edit, Preferences, and turn off the pop-up messages. They may have a distinction between what a pop-up message is and what a header message is. So you can just click out of that and make that go away. So those are my references for you to go through and just check your preferences. While you're in there, you can look at preferences relating to your own preferences for any of these items. So you can see on my preferences for accounting, there's not a lot of choices. For bills, there are no choices. For calendar, there's several. You may not have even known that there's a calendar in there. But you can go through each of these items and see if there's anything that you could make easier for you within the system by changing the preferences you have based on how you log in. And again, my preferences mean your login is the only one affected. So if you find something really cool and you want to share it with other people in your organization, you would need to have them log in and make those changes as well. So feel free to just share this video with them. Okay, everybody, that is what I have to talk about today relating to general preferences. As always, if you want to stay connected with me, you can find me on the WLXCo Facebook page. My website is WLXCo.com, or always feel free to email me at beth@WLXCo.com.